Well, good morning. I know it's rainy and gloomy outside, but it doesn't have to be that way in here. I am so thankful. I cannot tell you how thankful I am that you chose to be here today, because I know it was a choice. Nobody twisted your arm. Somebody might have made you feel guilty, but we didn't intend to do that. But I am so thankful that you are here and are a part of our church and are a part of this ministry and are a part of helping us to reach others through both services. One of the things that I try to read before I come up here, and sometimes I say this, and I'm sorry, this thing is just bothering me. So there, I'm going to put it right there so I can't see it. Okay, all right, so there I'm back. Is what our vision is as a church. And I don't know if you know that, but our vision as a church is people helping people become more like Jesus. People helping people become more like Jesus. Say that with me. People helping people become more like Jesus. I put down here, and I say this, and I repeat this to myself, to create, the win would be to create an enjoyable and meaningful, a memorable, meaningful worship experience that help people encounter God and fall in love with Jesus. And we've got a lot of big expectations. Creating the second service, which many of you come to 2 services, but creating this second service is a huge expectation and anticipation of what we believe God is going to do. But it's a great expectation that's coming into view. But some days are going to be good and some days are going to be bad, but we're still trying to do what God is calling us to do. Now, over the last several weeks, we've been talking about other great expectations. We've been talking about, as a follower of Jesus, that Jesus had great expectations for his disciples, great expectations for the kingdom to grow. And it was going to grow through people just like you and just like me, that are just average people that God was going to work through to make a difference in this world. He worked through a human being called Jesus, which was his son, but in human form. And then Jesus taught, God is going to work through you to reach the world. And so during this time over the last several weeks, we've been talking about several things that are great expectations that we all have as followers of Jesus. One was that we all need to have a great expectation of being a student, that we have to have a teachable mind, that we reminded ourselves that in order to lead, we need to be learning. So we use the phrase, learners are leaders and leaders are learners. The following week, we talked about how we could have a helping hand in serving others. That's an important part of being a disciple, of being a follower of Jesus, is serving others, is taking the time to help someone else in their situations that they're in. Last week, Jonathan taught about the importance of prayer as we celebrated World Communion together. And so the 3 things that we did was, talking about being a student or being a learner, serving God, and praying, and the importance of that. And today we're going to talk about a subject or a topic that is probably one of the most difficult topics that any pastor ever speaks on. Now, you think about all the things that you could think that would really be tough to speak about into this day and time, from the things that are going on in our world, from the border control, about illegal immigrants or aliens or whatever you want to say, however that is, or it could be from abortion, it could be all kinds of things that are going on in this world. That what would be the toughest thing that a pastor could speak about? Well, let me give you some ideas. The topic I'm going to speak about today, there's 800 scriptures in the Bible that deal with this topic. 800 scriptures. Now you might think it's sex, adultery, or something like that, because there are a lot of that. Jesus taught more about this subject than anything else other than the kingdom of God. He had 39 parables or stories that he told. 11 of these were about this topic. In fact, in the Gospel of Luke, 1 out of every 7 verses in that book talks about this topic. This topic makes people squirm. It makes them feel uncomfortable, and they try to change the subject when you talk about it. And what that is, and what this difficult topic is talking about money. Or to put it another way, biblical generosity. Now, I don't know about you, but money I've always been a situation in our household. It's always been a struggle with us to balance the books or to achieve the goals that we're wanting to do, and money seems to always be a barrier. Does it bother, has there ever been a barrier to anybody else accomplishing what you think needs to be done? So with all this and the struggles that we have with it, and the fact that there's so much written about it in the Scriptures, why would it be hard for us to talk about it in church? It would seem like that would be one of the top subjects that would talk about. If Jesus put that much emphasis on it, that we would talk about that as much. See, I think that the reason it's hard to talk about money in the church or talk about generosity in the church is that people see the church as they do their preteen or their teenage kids. They think about the church like they do teenagers. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Teenagers always have their hand out asking for money. Right? If you're a parent or something, you just think, well, they don't understand the value of money. They think money grows on trees. Have you ever, when you were young, did your parents ever say that to you? You think money grows on trees? See, I think some people think that the church is like that teenager. And so they treat the church like that. They're never satisfied with what they have. Aren't you? Have your parents ever told you that? Why do you need something new? Isn't what you've got good enough? Or they never appreciate what they have. Or they waste what they have. Don't we say that teenagers are... So there's this thing, and so I think that many people look at the way the church handles that in the same type of fashion. But I would also say, in fact, that people seeing other people in need look at them the same way. Don't they know the value of money? Don't they know that money doesn't grow on trees? How do they waste their money when we see people that are in need or struggling and we think all these things and it comes out? And see, I think that the Scriptures, or what Jesus wants us to know, or what God wants us to know through the Scriptures, is that money matters. Turn to your neighbor and tell them money matters. All right, so Charlie looked around for somebody. Everybody look at Charlie because he's sitting right there. And everybody's like, tell Charlie money matters, okay? See, money matters because money, and this is your first fill in the blank, money magnifies who you are. It magnifies your values, your priorities, and your devotion. Money magnifies who you are. Now, how many of you have ever been to the mall, at like a big mall like in Atlanta or in Macon or in Savannah? How many of you have ever gone to those malls where there's just people everywhere? Have you ever just... Well, you probably don't do it because y'all probably shop till you drop. I tend to drop until I have to shop. You understand what I'm saying? Jody's the shop till you drop. I go and I drop and I wait till she tells me to start shopping. I'm just going to sit there and watch. So I'm watching people. And I don't know about you, but you can learn a lot about people just watching them in the mall. Now, I'm not talking about Walmart, okay? I'm talking about the mall, where there's different venues for people to buy things. You watch them carrying their packages, you understand? And you sort of get a feel for what they are. And when they, like, you see them come out of Old Navy. I'm thinking Old Navy is great and everything, and it's economical, but I see people carrying those bags, and then I look at the people coming out of the Polo store. You understand? And I see what they're coming out, and I'm thinking about what they're spending. Or you see them come out of these expensive pocketbook places or different things, and you sort of see these things, and you sort of can get a view on people. You can see what they wear and sort of get an idea about who they are and probably can get a lot of information about how they handle or value things in terms of money. There's a story I'm going to tell you about today where Jesus was doing something similar. He wasn't sitting at a mall and watching people. He was watching people who came to church at a particular time of the year. It was right around Passover. And Passover is a once-a-year Jewish celebration where people came to from all over. They would come back from, it would be like a big homecoming. They would come home and they'd be a week-long or almost 10 days worth of celebration and activities going on leading up to this great remembrance of God delivering them out of Egypt called Passover. And so people would come and they would bring their monies. And so Jesus sat down in the temple one day. And we're going to read this. And I'm going to start with Mark verse 41 in chapter 12. So if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to read this to you. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Now many rich people threw in large amounts. Now, I want to remind you about this, that This is one of those subjects where Jesus is talking about or involved with money. He stops from his teaching. And remember, he only had 3 years of actual teaching this recorded in the Bible. Now, he was doing a lot of things prior to that. But at this point in time, he sits down at this Passover time and sits down and watches what people are doing. And he's watching people put money into the temple treasury. Now, I want you to understand that he's talking about actual money, moolah, denarii, whatever you want to call it, the jing-ching, whatever, the cash, I don't know. It's not talking about, oh, they're bringing a grain offering, or oh, they're bringing a wine offering, or oh, they're bringing some other type of thing. They are actually bringing money. Many people in the world today want to say, well, I don't want to talk about the money I bring to the church because I want to talk about the service that I do. Because I can substitute, since I can't give money, I'm able to give time, and there's a substitution for that. But in this case here, Jesus is watching not how much time they're spending working in the church, not how much sacrifices they're doing in terms of that. He's watching what they're doing with their money. It says they bring it into the temple treasury. The temple treasury. Now let me explain to you what the temple treasury is. When you look at according to Jewish writings, it's over 200, or around 200 AD, they begin to describe the temple treasury. The temple treasury were basically 13 offering boxes. And the offering boxes were wooden boxes that would collect the money, and on top of the wooden boxes were these large disc-like things that looked similar to a cymbal. They were metal out of bronze or some type of precious metal or something, and they were formed into a cone shape so that when you put your money in, it would slide down into the container and drop into the box, and it would be collected. There was 13 of these trumpet-shaped containers. The first 2 that were somewhere in there, now I want you to, I thought about how to describe this to you because when I went to Israel, I walked on this. I want you to think about the Walmart parking lot right now in Statesboro. Okay, think about the Walmart parking lot. That is the size of the temple area. You understand? But they're not cars. It's just a parking lot full of people. And somewhere scattered in that parking lot at Walmart, in that size space, there's 13 containers. And there's people lined up at those 13 containers putting in their offering. Now, the first 2 containers, somewhere there, are what's called the half shekel tax. That was the tax that they were expected to pay and drop in for being Jewish and being helped take care of the worship or take care of the facility. They also had a bird offering. A bird offering was something where people dropped their money in, and the equivalent of that money would be used to purchase birds, or in this case, they'd be purchased turtle doves or small doves, inexpensive birds that they were thousands of, hundreds of thousands of in that area. And so they were very inexpensive, and they would take those doves after they collected the money. It adds up to 1,000 birds, and the priest later on that day would sacrifice 1,000 turtle doves for the sins. It was a sin offering, if you will. Then there was another, the fourth container, the fourth trumpet, was one for young birds for a whole offering. Some people could afford more, and so instead of doing doves, they would give pigeons, which pigeons were more rare there, so it was considered more valuable. So depending on where your economic status was, or whatever you were able to give, or whatever you would do, you would give one of these forms of sin offering as a sacrifice. Then there was another trumpet that contained, the money from that went to buy the wood that would be used to burn the sacrifices. And then there would be another container that was made for the incense. And all these are scattered around. And then and then there was one that it's called the gold or the mercy seat. And this was the one that you put your money in if you had the money. That if you were wealthy enough or had the money, that you would put into this offering plate or this offering container that would go to provide the materials that were used, like the golden things they would use to burn the incense or the materials in the church. And then the last 4 containers were what they call free will offering. They'd be 4 containers strategically placed where if you had the money, you would drop so much in container, I guess 7, Then you would move, and I have a little bit more money, and I put it in 8, 9, 10. Now, some people could only put enough to do 1 or 2 of these containers, or could do many of the containers. This is what is called the temple treasury. So it's saying that during this time, many rich people came and threw in large amounts. So imagine these people who come and they've got their nice dress outfits on, particularly the religious leaders of that time. Because this is a time that the church people could really make an impression on how important the church is. So they're wearing their finest robes, they're wearing their finest outfits, and they're coming in and they're dropping the money in. But it doesn't say they're dropping, it says they're throwing it in. So imagine me taking a drumstick and pounding on that cymbal, how loud that would sound. Now, when I say that area that we're talking about is the Walmart parking lot, imagine a portion of that area being inside of concrete walls or stone or marble walls. So that when this money would hit inside of these trumpet-shaped containers, it made this huge, loud noise. So that from one side of the parking lot to the other, you could hear this cha-ching, cha-ching, as people threw it in. And so people could be aware of how God had blessed you. And understand that's what they were thinking. They were thinking that the people who had the nice outfits and the nice robes and who had the money to be able to not only put into this container for a whole pigeon, not a turtle dove, but a whole pigeon, could also put money into the wood and into the incense and into the mercy one and then go into the free will offering and put one in each one of the free will offering. God must really be blessing these people. And that's what everybody was doing. Jesus wasn't the only one who was watching this. Everybody was watching it. You can't go into this place and not see this. But Jesus is pausing and watching this. And as he watches this, he sees this other. So he sees the rich people lined up, throwing their money in. Verse 42 says, "But a poor widow came and put in 2 very small coins." 2 very small copper coins, only worth a few cents. Now, I did some research, and I'm thinking, well, what's 2 coins? What can you do with 2 coins? Well, actually, at that time, 2 coins, based on what Jesus says in Luke, he says, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? He's talking about at that time, you could get 5 sparrows for 2 cents. Do you understand? So you could probably afford to put in enough money to put in the offering for those turtle doves for your sin offering. So some theologians think that this woman was bringing this in for her sin offering. It wasn't about, she didn't have enough money to put into the others. She was putting this into her sin offering. So Jesus sees this. And in Mark 12, verse 43, he says, calling his disciples to him, Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They gave out of their wealth, but she gave out of her poverty and put in everything, all that she had to live on." Now see, I don't know about you, but I can do math. I might not be able to speak English or spell very well. I don't know the difference between T-O, T-W-O, T-O-O, and I get them confused sometimes. Josh knows it, but I don't. But now, I'm messing. But my point is, I know how to add. I know math. There's no way that I can read this and go that 2 copper pennies are more than rich people throwing in the money. There's no way you can tell me 2 is greater than 100 or 1,000. It does not make sense, economically or anything else. But Jesus says she's put more. But remember what I said earlier? Money magnifies who you are. It magnifies your values, your priorities, and your devotion. You see, this is where she was showing that she had faith in God, that she trusted in the teachings that she was taught as a young girl or a young lady or from her husband or somewhere she learned this was important, because even though she had very little, she went to church during this time to be obedient and to give. As I thought about this and reflected on this over the last several weeks, I thought about, when did she make the decision to put the money in the offering plate? I want you to just think about that a minute. Think about her doing this. Or maybe she did it like this. Maybe she walked up because she's in the middle of all these people with all this money, these flowing robes, these high-hat people, these people that's got it all, that God must really love them. Look how much they are. And here she comes, walking in. They're throwing their money in, everything. And then it's like cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. It's like it doesn't even exist. But she still did it. See, I got to thinking about these things. When did she make up her mind to give? You ever thought about that? Do you think she just showed up one day and was at church and the Spirit moved on her and she decided to give? She more than likely decided to give when she was at her house. And on the staff, we were talking about that. Well, how far do you think she walked to get from her house to the temple? Maybe a mile, maybe 2 miles, some type of difference, some type of distance. But I'm going to tell you, from getting from here to there, there's always obstacles. There's always things that's going to be there. You might say to yourself today, I want to be giving more. I want to be doing something that shows my obedience or my dedication to God. I want to show or be obedient to Him, and I want to give. But between where I am and there, I can't do it. But maybe you've made up your mind to give, and you start heading that way. And I thought about this woman. I thought about, well, how many obstacles would have been in her way? I mean, I want you to just think about it. She leaves her house and she decides, here's my last 2 pennies, the only thing I've got. I know that today is a time that I should go to the temple to give. It's during the Passover. This is the time we make our yearly sacrifice or our sin. This is all I've got. And so she makes the decision. She prays about it. I'm going to go give. And she makes a plan. And that's what your first P is of giving. When we go to make a decision to give, you've got to have a plan. You can count on spontaneity happening, and it will, but you have to have a plan. So she makes up in her mind, I'm leaving my house, and I'm heading to give to God. Now, 2 Corinthians, when Paul was writing about this in chapter 9, he says this, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. There's no pressure on her. She needs to give because that's what she thinks she needs to do. And so she makes a plan. I'm going. Now, between here and there, stuff is going to happen. It always happens. It happens in your life and it happens in my life. But she goes and she follows her plan. So on the way that she goes, there's other things that money could have come up, or there could have been vendors saying, hey, here's some food, or here's something you could buy. And you think, man, I could get me 5 sparrows. I could have something to eat, a meal, even a little sparrow. When she walks by that vendor, she sees that new pocketbook that she's been longing for. Maybe it's not a pocketbook. I don't know what it is. But she sees that and she holds to her plan. And she keeps going to church. I mean, I'm thinking about what kind of mental things would have been going on as she gets closer and closer. She stands in line, and probably there's something inside of her going, those 2 pennies really aren't going to make a difference. Just keep them to yourself. Isn't that the way it happens to us? When we sit there and we make this plan to give, Satan tries to stop us by saying these things, speaking to us through other people, going, why would you do that? That's not going to make a difference. Why would you do that? Or here's one that he's used on me. Here's one that Satan has used on me. Why don't you wait till you have money, then you can give money? Why don't you take that and invest it, and then when you earn a lot of money, then you can give a lot of money? But see what I'm doing when I obey that word instead of following my plan is I'm delaying my life. I'm delaying my heart. You have to stay and have a plan and make a plan that I want to give. You have to make the decision here that I'm going to give before you get there, and you have to stay focused on it. The other P of giving, of the 4 Ps, is giving is personal. Giving is personal. You don't have to just plan it, but it's personal. Somebody else can't do this for you. This is not about your mama giving money. for you, or your daddy giving money for you, or your cousin. This is about you and what you do with what God has given you accountability for. It's personal. See, for this woman, I think she's doing this out of a complete devotion. It's not about whether anybody else sees it. It's not about what anybody else does. It's about her devotion. She wants to demonstrate, I am authentic in my love for Christ. It's not because you're making me do it. It's not because this is about me and my convictions with God. It was personal. The other P, the third P, is giving is always connected to prayer. It's always connected to prayer and not pressure. You should never feel guilted into giving. You should prayerfully consider what you're going to give when you're making your plan here, and have prayer as you're heading to give to keep you focused. We need to pray and listen to what God is telling us about giving. We need to drown out the voices with our prayers, the voices that come in about control or about worry or about despair or about the economy, and really listen to what God is telling us. Because there's going to be those distractions. There's going to be those distractions, as I said earlier, the comparison traps. Well, look at what they're giving and look at what I'm doing. That's nothing. You're going to compare yourself to somebody else. It's not about them. Giving is never about what somebody else gives. It's about what you do. Money matters. Giving is, and I would say this is your last feeling, or that feeling back is, giving is always about motive and passion. See, this woman had no reason to think that she was special to God, but God had become special to her. That no matter, because think about the phrase they call her. What's her title? She didn't even have a name. You know what her title is? Remember what her title is? Widow. She's alone. No guy to take care of her. Dependent on others. I would also tell you this. The church or the temple took part of the money and distributed it to take care of the widows. So one of those voices could say, well, why give it to the church who's going to turn around and give it back to you? See, it's not about the money. She pushed through her feelings. She pushed through her insignificant part. And as I was talking to the team the other day, Jesus makes this note. She put 2 pennies in, all that she had to live on, right? How many of you have heard the word of tithing? Anybody ever heard the word tithing? Tithing stands for, do you know what percentage that is? How much? 10%, right? Now remember, I'm not a math major. 10%. Why didn't the woman just give 1 penny? 1 penny would have represented 50% of what she had. It would have been greater than the tithe. If this message was about the tithe, then she could have gave that and been well meeting the needs. Because remember what I told you? I thought that tithe, what that money was going to, was her sin offering. This was her way of saying, I got to depend on you, God. Every day I have to depend on you. I have to trust that when you call me to do something, when you talk to me when I'm here and call me to do something, and you call me to do it from here to there, I'm going to follow my plan. I'm going to trust you even when it doesn't look like it makes sense. We're going to start a second service even when it doesn't look like it's making sense. There's just a few people. It's just a few of us. People making sacrifices. See, I've come to the position that everything is made easier by love. I think this woman loved God so much that she's taking what that is, and it doesn't matter if it makes sense to anybody else. And I love God so much. Here, this is for you. And I would say this. Matt had told me this. There's a phrase that says, where God guides, he provides. Where God guides, he provides. But I would say to you, sometimes God guides by his divine limitations. Sometimes he guides you by what you don't have. There's times when you don't have things that you begin to understand more what God is guiding you to, because when you have plenty, you're giving out of your plenty. But will you love me when you don't have plenty? Will you love me when you doubt? Will you love me when you're afraid? Will you love me when you're struggling in your relationships? Will you love me when you're not doing well? Will you love me when you don't feel good? Will you love me when it doesn't make sense? Will it love me? Will you... See, that's where it comes back to the other thing. See, I think it depends on what motivates you and what you're passionate about. And when you combine motivation, the love for God, and the passion for God, you'll be creative in how you do that. See, divine limitation calls you to think about things like a creative way. By one of the things that I've done is like, I'm not going to drink tea this week. I'm not going to drink iced tea. And I take a week and I won't drink iced tea and I'll drink water. And I think about what that money is that I would have spent on the iced tea, and I put that in the offering. You see what I'm saying? I find creative ways to do that. See, the thing is, we're never too busy to be kind. And we should never be too poor to be generous. Biblical generosity starts with love. It starts with you and I making a plan, praying through that plan, walking that thing, ignoring the distractions, and placing that into God's hands. When you give to the church, don't give because you think the church needs your money. It's never about that. This is not a restaurant that you tip when the service is good. It's not whether it's like, oh, well, I know they need this or need that. This, when you give, is about you and your love, and about where you are in your walk with Christ. Where are you in your walk with Christ? See, I believe that love will call, we were talking as a team. I think this, letting go, is the easiest part of the journey. I think the walk from here to there is the hardest. I think when you make up your mind and you walk and you go through these trials and you get it in your mind and you trust God and you pray through it and you get over here, when you get there and you get the opportunity, man, it's a relief. It's like, we made it, God. Maybe that's what God's testing you on. Trusting Him. Letting go. Not just of your money, but of your anger, of your greediness, of your selfishness, of it being about you. Maybe that's what He's wanting you to let go. God, I want to give this to you. I'm glad to get rid of it.